If you had a choice between facing the monsters that scared you as a child or the real-life horrors that frighten us all as adults, which would you choose? Welcome to Free For All. I'm Miles Anderson.
And I'm Ken Cummins. Tonight we're going to be discussing those monsters that scared us as children. And we're going to be talking about them with two adults who are still watching them, writing about them, and appearing on TV to talk about them. And then in our second segment, we'll have performance artist David Webb, who will be spilling something other than blood entirely. But it's okay because he cleans up his own messes. At last, a performance artist who doesn't take himself so seriously. Before we get to David, though, let's return to those things that scared us as kids. Now, before we meet our first two guests, I want to take a look at just exactly what we're going to be talking about here. So let's watch.
Little indigestion, I guess. I'm going to have to give up beans. Of course, that's not going to leave me much else to eat. I already gave up meat and bread and sugar and...
There's something inside me! He's eating its way out!
You will hear only my voice, the edges and back again. It is a deep spinning hole. You feel yourself falling into that hole. Deeper into the spinning hole.
Is it over yet?
Yes, it's over. You can come out now, Miles. Come on out. With us on stage here is Charles Kilgore, who was responsible for that clip we just saw, and you put that together from your own private collection, I understand.
Right.
And you also publish a magazine called Ecco, which is devoted to this genre of film.
Yeah.
And seated next to you is George Stover, who also puts out a magazine on these type of movies and stars in them infrequently. And we'll get to you in a minute, George, but first, Charles, explain what we just saw here.
Well, the clips we saw started with The Flesh Eaters, which is a 1964 sci-fi movie about a Nazi experiment gone awry. And those little creatures were eating their way out of that unfortunate guy's stomach after he ingested them in a glass of lemonade.
He just drank them and
They came out, yeah.
they came out. How old were you when you saw this film?
I was 11 years old when I saw it at a drive-in with my mother.
And did it terrify you, or what was the appeal here?
It attracted and terrified me at the same time. I couldn't believe...
What attracted you to it?
Oh, I'd never seen anything like that before. I think when you're a child, you approach things with ambivalent feelings. You're rehearsing for adulthood. And I had, at that point, it's almost like seeing an automobile accident or something. You want to look, and then you don't want to look. And the movie's full of things like that. In fact, it's what Michael Weldon, a New York writer, has called a psychotronic movie. It involves a certain amount of element of fantasy, horror, sci-fi, or any ingredient that's overdone.
Now, were those monsters, creatures, and flesh eaters more terrifying than your real life, less terrifying? Or were you going through horrors in your own life?
I think all adolescents do. At the time that you're undergoing them, they seem pretty intense, but I think you're attracted to movies like this because it's helping you rehearse for dealing with the terrors in your own life.
Yeah. Well, now you look a little bit the part here, but George, you look pretty straight for this sort of fascination. Now Charles started when he was 11. How old were you when you got into this?
Well, I saw my first horror movie at the age of 8 when my cousin took me to see Them.
Oh, Them.
The film about the giant ants.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, I remember.
And when you're that young, things like that really scare you. Now, I watch it today, and I'm not so scared, but I still am fascinated by it.
Well, what scares you today?
Well, when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, some of the shock sequences scare me. I mean, they make me jump. The things that are really scary would be probably like the ones that reflect real-life horrors, like Henry. I didn't see it yet, but that's real life. At least when I'm watching a fantasy film, I know it can't happen.
You know, the monster there is something that's it's an embodiment of its creator's imagination.
Right,
Something like
right.
The fact that your bank may have just gone under and you've lost your life savings, or some real-life horror.
Right, that's really...
The night I watched Henry, I checked the doors to make sure that...
Henry is about a serial killer.
Yeah, it's based on Henry Lee Lucas.
Right.
This,
Henry Lucas, right.
Who admitted to something like 83 murders, but now
Right.
it turns out maybe he didn't do all those anyway.
And they said during an interview before he was in jail that John Waters wrote, I think, that... was this the guy that ate the children and said it tastes like chicken?
No,
No.
he wouldn't eat them because he didn't like barbecue sauce, but that's a whole different story.
Well, now, you had getting back to you for a second, you had a rather abusive mother, I've heard you. I've read in some interviews you, and that...
You're referring to the city paper thing. I never
Right.
really thought of her as abusive. To me, it was more like high drama.
Well, she was an alcoholic. And
She was an
would-
alcoholic. She would make these incredible statements to me, or it never got violent, though. She never punched me out. The most violent was when she tried to chop her way down into my bedroom with an axe.
Well, that's pretty violent.
Here's
How old were you then?
I was a teenager.
You were a teenager.
And I just locked the door, and she wanted to come in, and there happened to be an axe in the backyard, and she picked it up and put two and two together and started coming through the door. But
Real life, and this is again where we're finding the juxtaposition of real life and cinematic horror, and finding that real life horror is something you can't escape. You can always walk out of a theater, you can always turn the TV off, but the things that scare you in real life don't go away. And every day you wake up and they're there, and they scare you all damn day, and then the next day they're still there.
Well,
and they're not as easily defeatable, you know.
it's like a roller coaster ride versus an automobile accident. Now, if you're on a roller coaster, you simulate like you're going to die
10 times.
10 times,
Right.
but you're safe. You don't actually get injured.
Unless you're riding the Palisades.
Well, George, did you have a normal childhood, or?
Yes, it was pretty normal. As I mentioned, I saw Them, and then I discovered something else, a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, which probably inspired all of us to put out our own magazines.
Right.
Of course, that magazine had all kinds of pictures from monster movies, and that told me what to look forward to and what I missed from decades before, and that really fueled the fire.
They didn't have videos then.
No.
Where did you go to look for them? You'd have to go to drive-ins and just wait for them to come around?
Drive-ins, they used to make those little 8mm home movie versions of things.
They did?
You could buy condensed versions.
Uh-huh.
Well, now, both of you represent this sort of phenomenon that's going on now, this fanzine, as these magazines are called, fanzine explosion. There's some 250 of them around the country now, and they're devoted to horror films, slasher movies, gore pictures, grade, the B, C, D, E type movies. And you've done one for about 2 or 3 years.
3 years.
You've done one for
For about 11 years.
11
Before
years.
that, I put out a smaller version for several years, so I've been doing it since 1969.
Yours is called CinemaMacbre,
Right.
which is self-explanatory. Yours is called Ecco.
Echo.
Where does that name come from?
Okay, it came from one of the first really extravagant exploitation movies I ever saw. It was called Ecco, and it was a Mondo Cane copy, which is weird and bizarre behavior from all over the world.
The
And,
Lapland sequence. Will anyone ever forget?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's making an analogy to the way they castrate reindeers in Lapland.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But it made quite an impression on me, just as much as the Flesh Eaters. And I love the ad copy to Ecco because it says, if you find this film terrifying, the real world is terrifying.
Well.
But if you find it terrifying and beautiful, then you have understood it.
Huh. Well, now,
Heavy words.
Baltimore seems to be kind of a center for this, or maybe not a center, but they have a Fan X exposition there every August, September.
Like-minded individuals get together, show films. There's a dealer room. They usually have guests. The last one they had in September had Ray Harryhausen, who animated the creatures for a lot of the Jason the Argonauts and all the Sin Benders.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the skeletons come up out of the dirt,
Right.
The shields and the spears
Right.
and the swords. Oh, that's sensational. And I want to talk about something else for a second. When we were talking before the show about different types of horror movies, so you can break them down into different genres, and you can find recurring themes. And this probably goes back way before horror movies to Edgar Allan Poe and Mary Shelley and horror literature. We see things like vampires, the beautiful and seductive, but ultimately parasitic and destructive creatures. This has some correlation with things that you're going to find as an adult, that in your real life you will find seductive pleasures that ultimately drain and deplete your resources. We looked at the same kinds of things. What our point was that
Get to the
maybe
point
there's a
here.
model. Maybe there's a model, as you say, Brudelheim says. There's a model that we're giving children that says you are going to meet things in real life that are like these monsters. Recognize them and know how to deal with them. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you've read a lot more about it than I have?
Sure. Well, it's easy for a child, or easier for a child to deal with a fictitious story that has tumultuous circumstances happening to a character that is what they're projecting themselves into than it is for them to really experience it. Bettelheim said that in The Uses of Enchantment. And some horror film directors like Wes Craven has done the same thing with adolescents. A lot of his horror films, he says, are aimed at getting cathartic experiences to happen with adolescents who see their everyday fears and anxieties projected on the screen.
Name a couple of his films for our viewers.
His most famous is Nightmare on Elm Street, the Freddy Krueger
1, 2,
thing.
3, 4, 5. 6.
Well, he only
we
did
get
the
up to-
first one.
Oh, he only did the
Yeah,
first
he only did the first one.
Farmed out the rest of them.
The rest of them were just an attempt to make money off of the success of the first.
Right.
George, we've seen what Charles' favorite movies are. What are your favorite movies in this era?
Well, I lean towards the ones I grew up with. It's not because I don't like gore, it's just because I guess I watch a lot of these same movies over and over again. I haven't kept up with all the recent ones. I've seen all the Friday the 13th all the way up through 8. And once I start a series, I hate to break it.
Mm-hmm.
But I lean more towards the ones from the 50s that I grew
For
up
instance?
with. So,
You name
Incredible
them.
Shrinking Man, Them, This Island Earth, The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Webby.
You're a little more traditional here.
Well, perhaps.
What about The Tingler?
That was a great film.
That was a great film.
I used to see every film William Castle made.
Well, tell me if this is a story or what. I've heard that the theaters were originally wired with electric buzzers.
That's true.
That the lights would go out. Now, whenever the Tingler would appear, no, the Tingler was released, the lights go down,
Right.
and electric buzzers go off in the seats. And you're supposed to scream to get rid of the Tingler.
Right.
That's one of those elaborate special effects I've ever heard of, an audience participation type device. Did you ever experience the theater?
Yes, I did. I went to see it at the Hippodrome in Baltimore. That was the first run house for the film in Baltimore. And they had some of the seats wired up.
Oh, man.
It was really exciting
I
for
bet it
the
was.
youngsters to see that, you know?
Now, George, before people get the wrong impression of you here, you're also an actor, and you've appeared in such films as
Female Trouble.
Desperate Living. I guess you were in Polyester, too.
Yes.
Dracula's Daughter. Now,
Right. In Female Trouble, I was the chaplain who escorted Divine to the electric chair. And in Desperate Living, I was Mink Stoll's husband who got killed by the maid in the beginning. And I had a little part as a reporter in Polyester,
Yeah.
but it was cut from the film.
did you go to acting school to get these parts, or
Well, I took some acting courses in college and local theater groups.
just was?
I would have thought John Waters would forbid it.
Yeah.
That
Well,
seems so
It
natural.
didn't get to me until
Yeah.
after that the damage had been done.
How did you meet John?
We were in homeroom in the 8th grade together.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
It's a very close-knit community.
We're rapidly running out of time here, but why do you think there's such a surge in the popularity of these type of movies in your magazines now? Why the appeal now? Why are you're not making any money at this?
No,
Oh,
not at all.
no.
But you like doing it and you keep doing it, right?
Well, I think one of the reasons that movies are so popular now is look at the news. There's more horror in our everyday lives than ever before, and kids certainly have to be upset by this, and I think they're seeking an outlet by going to see this fictitious violence.
Yeah.
That they know. There's certain people around, I guess, that believe the movies and think they're real, but I think your average fan, and I'm sure I speak for you as well as for me, likes the fantasy element and doesn't want to really get out there with a knife and kill someone.
You got anything you want to add to
well,
that, George?
I enjoy fantastic horrors, not the real-life horrors. In fact, I can watch all the blood there is on the screen, but if I prick my finger, I get nervous. It's strange to say that, but
How odd that in America you can put anything on the news except blood. Maybe it keeps us from understanding how horrible war and death and all that stuff really is, because we're antiseptically removed from it.
Well, Miles, you're going to get the last word there, because I'm getting the signal we're out of time, and we have to make way for performance artist David Webb to come up here and spill his stuff. It's not as gory as what we've been talking about, but you should find it amusing. And after you watch him, we'll be right back.
Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Bluebirds singing a song, nothing but bluebirds from now on. Never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right. Noticing the days hurrying by, when you're in love, my, how they fly. Blue days, all of them gone, nothing but blue skies from now on. Ba-dum-bum, ba-da, ba-da-da. Never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right. Noticing the days hurrying by, when you're in love, my, how they fly.
David, I have a feeling you were probably a never-ending trial for your mother. How exactly did you begin this routine? Not at home, I hope.
Well, actually, at home. Yeah. I live with my brother now. He's working on his PhD in Georgetown.
And he likes this? He likes throwing milk all over the living room? Or?
See, we have this porch, which I can sort of practice my stuff out on, that's kind of terraced in, so the neighbors don't really see too much. And he's in working on his PhD, so
He's oblivious to anything anyway.
yeah.
You know, people at home got to be watching this and saying, who are they kidding? You know, we have these performance artists on. We had one on a while back who kicked her way out of dry cleaning class. You can hear you're spilling milk all over the studio. We need our free-for-all correspondent here, Art Grant. You call this art? What is the idea? But why do you devote your time to something like this?
I can...
Ken. Let me translate for Ken. What is this hogwash here? You know, how dare you call this stuff art? This is the Jesse Helms of public television, but
right.
Well, I can understand why you would question the validity of this, but I want to...
He does, I don't.
And, well, I want to...
It's a good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Speak.
I want to just remind you that this is an outgrowth of, you know, more traditional forms of visual art. Painting, you know, sculpture, Gilbert and George in England.
Under Serrano in this country.
But you don't think of this as comedy?
Not like not like straight slapstick, not like improv,
Not
live
like funny,
at
ha-ha.
live at the Comedy Store. That's not really the same.
The Comedy Store wouldn't let you pour milk all over the place like we did.
Yeah, it's best you're going to have to clear up here in a second. But wait a minute, let's talk about it. Now, you did a thing called Sadogram, where you'd show up people's door and read them a message and drip hot wax over yourself?
Well, actually, it was a anniversary show at a gallery called DCAC. It was a big event, and they had a lot of performance artists come in and do their thing. And the Sadogram was an offshoot of the flexogram, balloonogram.
The monkeygram, or what is the person who come in an ape costume, read your telegram?
Right.
It's a spoof of that. You don't call them spoofs, though.
No.
It's art. You can't get an NEA grant for a spoof.
Right.
Let's see if we can explain to Ken somehow. I understand your point about
let's take
the outgrowth of painting.
Let's take the men's room one. Explain that to me. Go ahead. You can gang up on me. Explain me. You do one in a men's
Guys,
room,
I'm
right?
outnumbered here, all right?
No, you're not. I'm on your side.
Oh,
He's on the other side.
No,
He's a
I'm
Philistine.
outnumbered.
And the thing is, the thing that's so difficult to explain, you can't explain concept art to somebody who, it's like either you get it or you don't get it. And
Okay, the men's room. You do a routine in the men's room, right, which is called...
Well, the men's room routine was a reaction to this graduate program I was in California, where the traditional pursuits were encouraged, and graduate students had their own studios, and it was all pretty serious. And I had a series of performances, all with fairly serious sounding titles, like Dave Webb discusses impotence, Dave Webb presents an alternative to smoking, and the bathroom one was Dave Webb presents an outline to receive funding, outlines a plan to receive funding. And it said on the flyer that I would be demonstrating this plan in the men's room at the university. So faculty arrived, students came into the men's room. I was there dressed, somewhat like this. And I had a small dish next to the mirror, towels ready for, after they performed their functions. And, after they washed their hands, I came forward with the towel, and, I made about $8 in an hour.
All right, now explain.
Well, no, wait, we are just about out of time.
I know we
here.
are.
Let's don't launch into some of...
No, I'm saying, where
quick.
is the art? I'm saying,
Where?
Demonstrate
The art...
philosophy that underlies...
Is it art or is it erratic behavior?
In, say, 20 words or less.
Well, ideally, the art comes in presenting an arresting image, something that alters people's perceptions of, the society they live in. That's ideally.
That would be any art.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to get a chance to see you perform again now, because you're going to... I take it you're going to clean up this mess.
I can handle that.
Okay, we're going to get to see that, and I want to thank you, Dave Webb, for being on here. Sorry if it seemed like we ganged up on you a little bit.
Oh, no, it's been a thrill, really.
And I also want to thank our first guests, Charles Kilgore and George Stover, for being on tonight, and that's it for this week. Tune in next time for Free for All.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Margaret for mentioning my name to the producers of this show. Secondly, I'd like to thank Hap, Miles, and Ken for having me on the show. And I'd like to thank my brother John for answering the phone. And I've got to thank Charlie and Fred just for helping me through puberty. The crew's been great. Thanks, guys. Jerry. Oh, you guys are great. I'd also like to thank Mayor Marion Berry for inspiring us all. Karen, thanks for the motel room. I'd also like to thank the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for bringing Renaissance painters to children 12 and under. There's so many people to thank, really, without whose help this would never have been possible. Oh, I'd like to thank Roy and Daisy for being good dogs. And I'd like to thank Ann Hamilton for calling me a wimp. Well, listen, thank you all, really. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.